involved in the first week. But eventually, when that video of JonBenét strutting around in her pageant outfit was released, and the tabloids came, and all of us came, you know, then the media started to put a lot of pressure, and some of these public officials rose to the epitome of celebrity. They enjoyed it. They started to leak stuff.
It's been more than 2 years since JonBenét Ramsey was murdered. How has public interest in this case influenced the investigation? I asked Cyril Wecht, a forensic pathologist and author of the book Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey, and Craig Silverman, a former deputy district attorney in Denver.
It's not unheard of for police and prosecutors to disagree, but the level of fighting here and the escalation, which has been back and forth, police to DA, it's reached unprecedented proportions, and it's really been destructive of the case. It culminated with Alex Hunter trying to use a tabloid reporter, Jeff Shapiro, a 24-year-old, who he took into his confidence, and he tried to maliciously smear the lead investigator on the case, Commander Eller. As a result, Commander Eller lost his job, and the police ended up running an undercover tape on this tabloid guy who was working both the police and the prosecutors, and then they had an incriminating tape against Alex Hunter. So you have all sorts of conflicts now between the police and the prosecutors. A good DA does his talking in court, as you well know, Judge. After the trial, he's free to talk, but before a trial, he should not be talking to anybody. Alex Hunter is telling Larry Schiller about changing his mother's diapers. Who wants to hear about that?
Absolutely. Well, Cyril, let me ask you about that, because those are great rabbit trails, and they actually come up in a trial and distract juries and others from the real facts in a case. But was there harm done to the physical evidence, to the investigation, such that it really compromised this case?
There's no question that this case was not handled professionally by law enforcement from the outset. And that goes through then the criminalist as well as the police, and then on to the coroner, who failed to go immediately to examine the body when it was found at 1:30 to have a better indication of when death might have occurred. And that, of course, relates to subsequently obtained testimony from two different neighbors, one audible and one visual. So it has been messed up, and the things that Craig has talked about certainly have added to the complexity, the contentiousness, and further obfuscation. However, as you know so well, Judge, and Craig and I, over the years in all of these cases, there aren't many perfect cases.
Doctor, do you think there'll be an indictment coming out of this grand jury in April?
Yes, I do.
You do? Thinking of John or Patsy Ramsey?
Yes.
John or? Which one?
Well, I think both.
All right. What do you think, Craig?
I disagree. I'm afraid we're not going to see an indictment. I think we're going to see a Hunter report, strong on criticism of the police department.
Oh, dear. Craig Silverman, Cyril Wecht, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge.
The JonBenét Ramsey grand jury is supposed to wrap up its investigation by April 21st. Of course, we'll continue to follow the story.
Obviously, the person who killed JonBenét felt very comfortable in that house, because after she was hit over the head, the events that took place were anywhere from 10 to 35 minutes. And therefore, that person had no fear of discovery.
Will we ever find out who killed that little girl? Well, on Saturday, best-selling author Lawrence Schiller takes his new book, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, to a town hall meeting in Boulder, Colorado. As I discovered when I interviewed Mr. Schiller last week, there may be some new evidence, but will it take investigators anywhere they haven't been? Well, I asked Cyril Wecht, a forensic pathologist and author of the book Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey, and Craig Silverman, a former deputy district attorney in Denver.
We know now that Fleet White, a good friend with John Ramsey before the incident, was much more involved than a lot of us thought. He was right there when John Ramsey found his daughter. The way John picked up his daughter sort of like a cardboard cutout, ran upstairs. His peculiar actions afterwards, including reserving a flight within a half an hour of finding his little girl. He reserved a flight for Atlanta, and he offered an explanation that he had business to attend to in Atlanta. That didn't make any sense because the police knew he was supposed to go to Michigan for a family vacation.
Well, what about you, Dr. Wecht? Anything in there that jumped out that you hadn't reviewed, hadn't seen before, that was incriminating, and then we'll get to some exculpatory?
Well, some of the things that have come out about the blanket and somebody having to know about the washer and dryer, the fact that the...
Let's tell people, in case they haven't heard this, that apparently she was wrapped in a blanket that the housekeeper thought came from a dryer that was sort of hidden away in a cabinet upstairs.
Yes.
Somebody would have to know where that upstairs washer was and all the rest of it.
Exactly. And then the room in which the body was allegedly found was a room that this housekeeper of many years wasn't even aware of the existence thereof. So, you know, other things, of course, that have come out that we did come to learn after our book went to press a year and a half or so ago, the red fibers on the inside of the duct tape and so on, things that Craig and many others have known now.
And those red fibers being fibers that apparently matched what Patsy Ramsey had on the night before.
Sweater, which she had on along with full makeup when the police came about 6 o'clock in the morning, although she had just gotten up a half an hour or so before, had found her daughter missing after seeing the note first, and run around the house in understandable panic, looking for the daughter, looking in the boy's room, looking in her husband, waking her husband, and so on. I mean, all of these things are just so totally incongruous with what anybody would expect of reasonable parameters of human behavior in the face of such an incredible tragedy. This is simply unfathomable.
Craig, what about exculpatory evidence? There was some apparently blood in her underwear, the DNA, which matches no one around, a pubic hair found on the blanket, which doesn't match up. What's this all about?
Awfully confusing, especially the blood evidence. What they thought might be semen at first turned out to be blood, which matches JonBenét. And then there are two other mixed DNA samples that they can't match to anybody, samples that are not blood and not semen. So I suspect it must be saliva or sweat. And these are mystery pieces of evidence, particularly located in the little girl's underwear. It's bizarre, as is the pubic hair. These are great events for the Ramseys because it isn't too hard to create a reasonable doubt given those mystery objects.
Well, Cyril, that's your field. What about that?
Yes, well, I am very anxiously looking forward, Judge, to seeing these reports and talking with the experts, and eventually those will be made available. I'm hoping maybe I can learn something before then. I don't have an answer, but may I point out again something that we've discussed previously, namely that this little girl who had been sexually abused unquestionably with blood there in and around the vagina has the panties and the other garment pulled up. So in other words, this outside intruder, after doing all of these things, was so concerned and so sensitive that he redressed the little girl. Just think about that. I think the DNA, I have a feeling that there's going to be an answer, and it is not going to be as much of an obstacle.
All right, speculate for us. What is your gut telling you?
What is my what?
What is your gut telling you? Speculate for us.
Oh, speculate. Well, I just, you know, there can be contamination. There can be mistaken tests. DNA testing is extremely sensitive, and if you don't do it carefully, the slightest contamination from the person doing the testing.
We remember the OJ case.
Yeah,
Craig, you're not
that's right.
But isn't that the problem, though, Dr. Wecht? And that is the defense will have a field day either way. If it is contamination, and I think your speculation is probably right on, if it's contamination, that's devastating for the prosecution. The prosecution has already shot themselves in the foot so many times. There are so many self-inflicted wounds that it's hard to believe that this bolder prosecutor, anyway, would even bring a charge, let alone prevail at a trial.
Back with more after the break.